You're listening to Gwatney Unplugged on Newsradio 102.9 KARN with Scott Romine. Brought to you by Gwatney Automotive Group.
AR.com. We're talking with bodybuilder Shawn Maves from Canada, and he has not once said, hey. I kind of, you kind of, everybody down here assumes that that's part of the language up there, but I guess that's not true, huh, Shawn?
Well, I do TV and radio, so I make it a point not to say A.
Exactly. Well, we all think everybody says it up there, so we don't know any different. Hey, my hero has always been Arnold Swartzenegger, and I wanted to ask you about him. I mean, he's probably the most famous bodybuilder of all time. I guess he was kind of the face of it, I know, for years. How big a role do you think genetics or whatever contributed to Arnold being Arnold? Was his mindset? Maybe if drugs never even existed, Arnold would still be the champion.
Yeah, well, if there were no drugs at all and everybody trained naturally, Arnold still would have been Arnold. He would have still been on top. He seemed to have, that gift of charisma. A lot of guys forget. You can have a great physique and not have the charisma. Like, if you want to sell yourself as a bodybuilder, you need to look good on stage and also do some of the off-stage stuff. So Arnold put it together. And we got to remember back then, there was no insulin, no synthetic GH. The guys were still using very dangerous, toxic drugs back then, but they had smaller waists. And, it opens up that debate, which era was better, the classic versus the modern day. We know guys back then were taking a lot of steroids. But if you look at bodybuilding today, it's really, in many ways, the opposite of something that it once stood for, which was strength, health, and fitness. Now, you got to go back to the 40s and the 50s to really say that, when it really was a more modest display of muscularity. Then the 60s, the drugs start getting into the gyms. The golden era guys, we know, were taking stuff, testosterone, Winstrol V for cutting, some of the other stuff, Anadrol. We know that even growth hormone was available back in the 70s and 80s from cadavers. They got rid of that stuff in the 80s, and they came up with 91. Everything changed. You'll notice in your bodybuilding magazines, everything changed in the 90s. 92, Dorian Yates stepped on the stage and thus started the mass monsters you see on stage today, we call them. And that's because of the drugs changed. It wasn't the training changed that much. It was the drugs the guys were using, and which allowed them to train differently also. So it's a sad reality, but the golden era, to me, aside from the drug issue, was a more aesthetic time. There was more graceful posing. Look at some guys like Ed Corney. And the posing trunks. Here's something I'm going to say. The guys won't like to hear modern day. I don't like the modern day posing trunks. They were much more modest back in the day. I really appreciate that about that era. And I don't know, how do you feel about that, Scott?
I don't wear a thong myself. When I when I pose. Yeah, I mean, I prefer Arnold's era. Those guys. There was a guy in the 80s that I really liked the way he had built up. Remember a guy named Bob Paris?
Yeah, Bob Paris.
To me, he looked like if you took He-Man out of the cartoon, you would have Bob Paris. There was a guy named Scott Wilson, I believe, that I followed a lot in the magazines. I don't know if you remember that name.
Yes, I do, yeah. But another great physique was Franco Santoriello, former Mr. USA. He's also doing some Christian ministry work out up in Ohio in the prisons, and that's another great classic physique. The classic physique era really ended in 91. That's when I got out in 90. Some guys will say the late 80s wasn't really classic, but the real line in the sand was 92 when Dorian came in. That's when everything changed.
What was your favorite movie from the day? Because in the 80s, bodybuilders led the action movies. Was there one that stood out to you?
Yeah, well, we mentioned off air that the Rocky films. There's so many people. How can you not like a Rocky film, especially Rocky 1? Such a great plot.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we mentioned off air. We're going to talk perhaps about the question we could throw out there. Could Stallone be a bodybuilder? And I'll answer that one quickly. If you look at Stallone's physique, compare Rocky 1 to Rocky 4. Totally different physique. Now, in Rocky 4, he looked like a bodybuilder to me.
Yes,
he probably would have done well at the state level or equivalent to what I went up here at the provincial level. he looked like a bodybuilder. He was training with Franco Columbu, who was Arnold's training partner. So he was on a strict diet, intense training. I think he was training like 6 or 7 days a week.
Yes, he was.
So
he
probably would have done okay as a bodybuilder. But the thing is, he got into the movie business, and he's doing better than me. So.
And I think when he was at his biggest was probably Rambo 3, about 1989. The guy looked incredible in that one. Yeah,
I'll just mention this. First Blood was actually filmed up here in Canada, I think in a small town called Hope, BC.
That's right.
If you go back and watch that, I looked it up. It's kind of interesting. I always liked the geography of that movie. It's kind of an interesting plot.
Yeah, and you could tell he was into working out at that point, but he wasn't like full-on bodybuilder. I think he started working with Franco before the second Rambo film. And that's when he really kind of exploded with his training and, his physique and what he looked like and whatnot. Franco, not everybody knows, is in a lot of Arnold's films.
Franco Columbu?
Yeah.
I actually didn't realize that. I haven't paid attention to that. Which film were you referring to?
Well, in Conan, everyone knows the opening scene where they go in and raid and kill his parents and all of that. He's the scout. He's the first bad guy that you see jump up on the big boulder, and then all the horses and Rottweilers and everything comes past him. In the first Terminator, Franco is the Terminator when they flash back to the future. And Reese, or the character of Reese, kills the Terminator when they're living down in the little bunker underground. That's Franco with the big gun. He's the Terminator in that film. So he was in quite a few of Arnold's movies and things. So those are two that kind of stand out to me.
Okay, that's interesting. Very, very fascinating that he got into the film industry too. I didn't realize.
Oh yeah, Arnold took care of his friends. That's for sure. What do you think these guys Arnold's age today? Some side effects that they're having to deal with because of things that they used in the 70s. Surely that is an issue now.
Yeah, we're seeing some of the golden era guys are experiencing some health issues, but here's the thing. A lot of the guys from the 90s and early 2000s, they're experiencing more health issues than some of the golden era guys. And that's because of the drugs the guys were using. Some of the golden era guys also experienced. Mike Mincer passed away when he's 49. Some of those guys passed away early. But you see today, it's no secret. It's no surprise what I'm going to say here. There's a growing list of bodybuilders and wrestlers who are dying prematurely. We know former Mr. California, Rich Piana, passed away when he was 46. Greg Kovacs, 44, passed away. My heart goes out to the family. He was a former bodybuilder up here in Canada, once known as the biggest off-season bodybuilder in the world. Mike Mincer passed away 49. David Durth, my heart goes out to Dreen and the family, passed away recently, 53. These are all pros.
That's true.
David was a pro in the early 2000s and the 90s, and a lot of these guys are having issues. Here's the thing: anabolics cause a lot of heart issues. Guys have premature heart attacks. It's not 100% you're gonna have a heart attack, but your chance goes up. Your chance goes up of kidney disease. Your chance goes up for liver cancer. Your chance goes up for higher blood pressure. GH, here's the thing people don't realize. GH, the stuff the guys are using today, accelerates the growth of not only healthy but cancerous tissues. If I'm talking to a male, the average male has microscopic cancerous cells in the prostate. Why would you want to accelerate?
Yeah, no kidding.
The growth. Like, why would you want to take a chance just to look good on stage to become an Instagram star? Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
You mentioned Mike Mincer. I think that guy had more potential than anyone in the sport that was not realized. He quit before he won an Olympia, and I think he could have probably somewhere in the 80s been Mr. Olympia if he'd have stuck with it. I don't know.
Yeah, Mike Mincer, there's still a debate whether they should have crowned him Mr. Olympia. I forget what year it was.
80? I think 80.
I think it was 80. 80 was the year. Yeah, I think he's... And him and his brother, and unfortunately his brother passed away just a few weeks after Mike.
Yeah,
and strange. there's some great stories and there's some sad ones in the sport of bodybuilding. There's no question.
Yeah, and that 1980 being the most controversial event I think that ever happened in the history of bodybuilding. And I want to ask you about a few more things. We're talking with Shawn Maves. He is with bodybuilding.com. He's one of their writers. He hosts a TV show up in Canada, and he's a bodybuilder himself. Scott Romine, Gwatney Unplugged. We'll be right back right after this.
You're listening to Gwatney Unplugged on Newsradio 102.9 KARN with Scott Romine. Brought to you by Gwatney Automotive Group.